समारोह को और जीवन के सभी।
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. A preliminary report into the Air India crash that killed 260 says fuel control switches were moved to cut off just before impact. One pilot asked why the fuel was shut off, but the other denied doing it, the report shows. President Trump praised Texas Governor Abbott and Homeland Security Secretary Noem for a, quote, incredible job responding to flash floods that has killed at least 120 people, including many children. Touring Kerr County, the epicenter, Trump said both state and federal teams had worked well together to handle the deadly disaster. Multiple explosions lit up the Gaza sky early today, captured from southern Israel by Reuters camera between 2:16 and 5:17 a.m. local time. This comes as the UN Rights Office says it had recorded at least 798 killings at aid points in Gaza over the past 6 weeks. Palestinian officials say ceasefire and hostage deal talks in Qatar are on the brink of collapse. They accuse Israel of deliberately stalling by sending a team with no power to finalize issues like troop withdrawal and aid access. In his visit to Pyongyang, Russia's Sergei Lavrov praised North Korea for its important contribution to liberating Russian territories. Speaking in Wonsan, he thanked North Korea's leadership and troops for their excellent combat training, according to the Russian Foreign Ministry. The US State Department says it's aware of reports that a Palestinian American was fatally beaten to death by Israeli settlers north of Ramallah. Palestinian media say 10 others were also injured in the attack, with Israeli authorities saying they are investigating. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio downplayed talks of tensions with Japan, saying there is no drama or division, despite Tokyo's move to reduce reliance on the US. He also rejected reports that Washington is pressuring Japan to boost defense spending, calling it an encouragement rather than a demand. Fast-moving wildfires have forced tourists and residents to evacuate parts of the Grand Canyon. The US National Park Service says the Dragon Bravo and White Sage fires have burned thousands of acres, prompting urgent evacuations. Now, our top story. A preliminary crash report has just been released into the India Air Boeing 787 disaster. The world's deadliest aviation accident occurred in over a decade. The Dreamliner, en route from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick, crashed shortly after takeoff on June the 12th, killing 275 people on board. Investigators now say both engines' fuel cut-off switches flipped to cut off immediately after the jet reached takeoff speed, a move that starved the engines and caused a rapid loss of thrust. The cockpit voice recorder captured confusion between the pilots, with one asking, "Why did you cut off?" and the other replying, "I did not do so." A ram air turbine deployed to provide emergency power, and the pilots attempted a relight, but only one engine showed partial recovery. Crucially, the fuel tested clean. The engines were newly installed, and no safety recommendations have yet been issued to Boeing or GE, indicating no immediate evidence of design failure. The probe, however, continues. We will be joined by a guest very shortly to discuss this in further detail. As we've said previously, this preliminary report that's come out today after the tragic incident last month of the Air India Boeing 787 aircraft, which crashed, killing 275 people with one survivor. This preliminary report is an early report on this incident. However, we will get to know all the updates from our aviation expert, who is hopefully joining us very shortly. We're now joined by our guest today, who is our Wing Commander Sudha Karan, who is an aviation expert. He joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us, Wing Commander, on the programme. First of all, what are the takeaways from this report? It is an early report, and it's good not to speculate. Any immediate flags in pilot error, mechanical failure, or traffic control? What are your thoughts on this information that we have so far?
So this preliminary report has now brought the focus primarily onto a very, very key area of concern, which we had to begin with. There could be only 2 or 3 plausible reasons why this accident had happened, when it happened on that day when we were discussing. So out of that, one of the reasons was a potential bird strike, which has been ruled out now totally. The next 2 reasons is pilot error, which is a human error, or something which has happened in the cockpit which should not have happened. That is number 1. Number 2 was a possible technical snag, a software malfunction, a hardware malfunction, or some kind of a sabotage which happened remotely, an external exploit. So these were the 2 angles that were left out. So let me, bring to context what exactly happened on that day. So this complete accident lasted all of around 59 seconds to be precise, right?
Yes.
Which included 3 phases. The first phase was when the pilot aligned himself in the runway for the takeoff, and then all the checks, pre-flight checks, were normal. And then the pilot, started from idle to, the throttle going to the full position, wherein the engine attained its maximum speed. It had achieved a speed of 170 knots in under 15 to 16 odd seconds. Around 20 seconds it had achieved from the idle to that level. Now that was the V1 speed, which is what enabled the aircraft to go up in the air. So till that portion, everything was normal. Okay, so since it is normal, we will take it away. The second part is what happened immediately after takeoff. So as we can see, immediately after takeoff, at 170 knots, this aircraft took off, and within 3 to 4 seconds, this report today says that one of the pilots had observed that the engine was, not developing the required thrust, and that it was getting fuel starved. And when he looked at the fuel switch position, immediately he found both the fuel switches toggled from the run state to the cutoff state. Right? This is the first observation. Now, this is corroborated by the fact that pilot 1 asks to pilot 2 that why is this switch in the wrong position? And the pilot 2 responds that I have not done this. This is something that this report is talking about. Now, this is a response given by one pilot to another pilot. Let's keep this for the time being. The third part is, since it was all of 625 feet, at the time when this thing was noticed, we have to understand that the flight had not developed enough height to be able to do anything. Now, had this happened, say 15-20 seconds later, the flight would have gone to a height of around 2,000, 3,000 feet, right? It would have developed the thrust, and that thrust itself would have enabled the flight would have to generate far more height, and then it would have climbed to a greater height. Now, this means that at that point of time, had this incident of fuel switch happened, or the engines would have been devoid of fuel, we can very safely say that there was every chance that the flight, even despite having a dual engine failure, would have landed on the runway just by gliding. There is a very high possibility. But here at 625 feet, this has not happened. So this gives rise to a very, very important question. This is what we need to focus on. That why did this happen exactly at that most critical point of vulnerability? At 625 feet, there is nothing that an aircraft can do. It is just going to come down like a stone, which is what eventually it did. Now, when the pilot observed this, the pilot flips both the fuel control switches from the state of off to on, which means it clearly shows that both the pilots were not involved in this. One pilot wanted to bring the engine back to life. There is also this report which talks about one engine developing, getting relighted and developing the power, and the other engine not responding. This is when the thrust was not found adequate, and the aircraft was losing height to around 900 to 1,000 feet per minute, and then eventually it came down, and this accident happened because it went and hit a building. Now this is what has happened. So which means the focus is on why did that switch go on at that critical point from a run state to a cutoff state, and how did it happen, and what were the sequence of events that led to this. Now let me come to this, because this is where our focus is. Now, if the engine doesn't get the fuel, it is common sense that it is not going to develop thrust. And then the pilot has reported lack of thrust, and then the mayday call has come, and then finally this accident has happened. So which means, so there are only two possibilities. Did the other pilot switch it off, or did something within the hardware or software lead to this situation? Now, this is where I will take you to the design of the Boeing aircraft, wherein the Boeing aircraft's fuel switches are specifically designed with the human-in-loop philosophy, which means unless and until a human doesn't deliberately change the position, there is no way that the switches can change the position. That's what is as per the Boeing manual. Now, if you look at the construct or the design of the switches itself, you will find that the switches are not normal switches. It requires a security lever to be operated, which will then allow the switch to go from one position to another position, which means that there is no electromagnetic or mechanical possibility of this switch going on its own without the intervention of a human being. Now, this is the point that we need to note. If we look deep down, we will also find that this switch could be switched off by the pilot if in case the EICAS, which is the engine automatic control regime, and the FEDEC, which are the ones which will give you warning signals. Like Boeing has given advisories in the past. Why this advisory was given was that if there is an inadvertent selection of this switch to the wrong position, the fuel would get starved, the engines could get starved, and the fuels will not go into the engine, and therefore it could lead to catastrophic consequences, and the engine automation will not be able to take control of it. Why? Because the automation is subservient to the human intellect. The pilot is supreme. So if the pilot has switched off a certain switch position, the automation system is designed in such a way that it will not override. It will say, it will accept that this switch has been done with a deliberate intention because of certain reasons. Now, this is what, again, this report says that there was no ICAS warning or a FEDEC warning. And there is no involvement of the ICAS or a FEDEC to initiate this level of what you call as a switch turnover. Now, this is curious, right? You need to look into this with a far greater depth. So, if the switch cannot be remotely controlled or activated, if it is a physical manual switch which needs to be, handled by the pilot, then the possibility that the electronic system or the software malfunction can lead to this is minimal, right? Because that is how the designs are. The next point that I want to make is this, mind you, 10 years, this flight has never had an accident in its record. If there were software glitches at design stages, then, we'd have seen such events in the past. This is very, very peculiar. And I believe that the next level of investigation will focus on these aspects to understand why this happened. I also, before concluding, want to tell you that this has happened at a critical window of 4 seconds just after takeoff, which means the element of a human sabotage within the cockpit cannot be ruled out. Though I'm not trying to blame anybody, but that is the initial pointer that is coming out of this particular report. We have to keep, when there is an accident like this happens, I have to be extremely clear that I'll keep all options of suspicion open.
Of course.
And today, paramount pointer is towards the fact that there is something in the cockpit that has happened in that 4 seconds. Because if it has happened, why did it happen in that 4 seconds? These are questions that the next level of investigation has to find answer to. We will then be able to put at rest why this happened and why it has to be prevented in the future, because we'll have to look at this.
Wing Commander, just very, very briefly, because we are running out of time. Obviously, following this crash, there's a lot of fear surrounding taking flights, understandably, of course. But based on this report and what you've seen so far, do you think this was an isolated incident, or does it point to wider safety lapses in India's aviation sector? I have to reiterate, we don't have much time. But yes, I'm just wondering about that question.
Steve, let me tell you very clearly, this is a 1 in a million possibility which has happened, right? And the pointer is, an incident inside the cockpit. So therefore, how do you look at a human angle? That is very, very difficult. And therefore, I will see it as an isolated event. But then I will wait for the report to come, the full report to come. Because right now, with the data that we have, the inferences that I can draw is only this much. And I have shared my complete insight, logic, rationale, and reasoning, my chain of thought, as we see in ChatGPT these days. So my GPT says, this is the most plausible reason. Rest it is for the people to make out.
Yes. Wing Commander S. Sudhir Karan, thank you very much for your insight in joining us on the programme. We will bring you any information that we get on that report and anything on the Ahmedabad air disaster that comes our way. Anyway, moving on. Multiple blasts rocked Gaza in the early hours of Saturday as explosions lit up the sky around dawn. The strikes were captured by Reuters cameras positioned on the Israeli side of the border. This comes amid growing fears that ceasefire negotiations between Israel and Hamas in Qatar are on the verge of collapse. According to Palestinian officials, Israel sent a delegation to Doha with no real authority to negotiate, stalling talks on key issues like troop withdrawal and humanitarian aid access. Despite Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's earlier optimism, stating a deal could be reached in a few days, negotiators now say the process has nearly broken down. With Gaza's largest functioning hospital now warning of collapse, the humanitarian crisis deepens as the diplomatic window narrows. We're now joined by Shruti Dasgupta, who's an international affairs expert. She joins us live from New Delhi to discuss this in further detail. Shruti, thank you very much for joining us. There was some optimism here a few days back in regards to President Trump's statements, in regards to Benjamin Netanyahu's statements, in a ceasefire that could be done within the next week, at least a 60-day pause in hostilities. However, there's been some serious concerns now coming out of the delegations, in which a Palestinian official has said that the Israeli delegation sent to the Qatari capital has no real authority. That's from a Palestinian official, of course. Should we still have optimism in regard to these talks? Or some critics would say that this is Israel putting their delegation to Doha for the theatrics. What are your thoughts on this?
I can argue both sides of the coin, Thomas. Thank you so much for inviting me. But for me personally, it looks like a stalling tactic that was held on the insistence of United States because of President Trump's own personal ambitions of being the global peacemaker. So this looks more like theatrics to me personally, where it feels as if they sent the delegation through, but as when we spoke last time, I believe I pointed out that while the delegation is there, the IDF is walking into southern Lebanon. The IDF has attacked Yemen. Now Yemen has retaliated with attacks against Israel itself. So the war in terms of Israel's dominance continues in the Middle East, and the peace talks are just a way to stall Hamas and appease Trump and US and the West that, look, we are open to peace, but not at the term of what the Iran and its proxies want to project it. So more theatrics rather than actual words on paper and signing procedures.
There's obviously been vast opposition within the Israeli government. A lot of members of Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition that don't want a ceasefire. Do you think it's in Benjamin Netanyahu's interest to end hostilities in Gaza? There's been a lot of claims that people believe that he is stalling this conflict, or has been stalling this conflict, in order to keep his position as Prime Minister and to halt his corruption trial. What do you think of these allegations?
Well, the corruption trial itself is, I think, more of smoke and guns rather than actual cause where we can actually see some major funds being diverted or a major allegation. It's very minimal. The amount is also not very shocking. More of a political pull and push rather than an actual corruption charge. But yes, he is head of a coalition government, and the coalition is a far-right government. They do not want the ceasefire. They are putting that pressure on him, and he himself has stated from 1996 onwards that he wants an end to Hamas itself. He has put out Iran as their stated enemy since a very long time and has been ringing the nuclear alarm bells since then. So this is an ongoing process for Netanyahu. This is something that he wanted to have from not just now, from the current situation, but from a very long historical perspective as well. So he faces his own coalition's pressure, and he faces the opposition's pressure as well, because the opposition, Israeli opposition, is stating that they want to put the hostages first. In this particular peace deal, the hostages are used as political capital by Hamas. If they let go of all the hostages, the live as well as the dead ones, they will face, they will be empty-handed on the table. So they do not want to do that, and that is the pressure point the opposition is building for Netanyahu. So either way, this deal being on the table was not going to be acceptable in any form to any Israeli, be it Netanyahu or his opponents. So it is obviously, as I said, theatrics, and Netanyahu has no need to appease the Hamas and Palestinian authorities.
Shruti, thank you. You are staying with us. We now move west, where a dramatic turning point in one of the world's longest-running insurgencies, Kurdish forces have begun destroying their weapons in Iraq, signalling a formal end to their decades-long armed struggle against the Turkish state. At a symbolic ceremony near the ancient cave of Kasyan, 30 fighters of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, laid down rifles, a machine gun and even a rocket launcher before a cheering crowd. Speaking exclusively to the AFP news agency, the group's top female commander, Beze Hosat, said the PKK now wants to return to Turkey and join mainstream politics, but warned that the process hinges on one condition: the release of the group's jailed founder, Abdullah Öcalan. Let's listen in to the comments made by the co-president of the PKK.
Bize demokratik siyaset hakkı tanıması gerekiyor. Bizim özgürce Türkiye'de, Bakü'de, Kürdistan'da örgütleme hakkımızın olması gerekiyor. Yani biz özgürce Bakü'de, Kürdistan'da, Türkiye'de hem demokratik siyaset yapabilmeliyiz hem de siyaset yapabilmemiz için, özgürce örgütlenebilmemiz için demokratik entegrasyonu Türkiye ile sağlayabilmemiz için o zaman bizim özgürce Türkiye'ye gidip kendi öz kimliğimizle özgür bir biçimde demokratik siyaseti yürütmemiz, demokratik örgütlenme çalışmalarını geliştirmemiz gerekiyor ve bu konuda da yasaların çıkması lazım.
We're once again joined by Shruti Dasgupta to discuss this further. Shruti, how credible is the claim that the PKK organisation want to transition into mainstream Turkish politics? And also if you could give a little bit of background information of who this group is, what their objectives are.
So the Kurdish PKK is the Kurdish Workers' Party. They are a group of Kurdish militants who have been fighting for recognition. The Kurdish people, since the fall of the Ottoman Empire, have been the largest group of landless people. The Kurds are settled along, if I talk of current day borders, they are settled largely in Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and I think a little parts of Azerbaijan as well. So this is the region that they occupy. For Turkey itself, when in 1994, when they started asserting more presence, they wanted an autonomous region for themselves. They faced aggressive military aggression, and hence it developed into a militancy versus military standoff between Turkey and the Kurds. So right now what we are seeing is that Erdogan himself has appreciated this particular move by they're called PKK, although it translates into English as Kurdish Workers' Party. So the PKK are putting down their weapons, and this is being appreciated by Erdogan and the other Turkish administration. They feel that this would put an end to at least 4 decades of militancy in the region. And in return, what the Kurdish people want, one of their basic demands has been the release of one of their leaders called Abdullah Kolaman or something like that.
Yes.
I'm getting his name wrong. Probably he's
Okay.
called Apo in or meaning uncle in Kurdish, and his release is what has been their primary goal for the last few years, and this continues to be one of their demands after they've laid down their arms. The Kurdish are 1/5 of the Turkish population. They want to be able to be heard in the Kurdish politics as well. And the US, Israel, West, EU, everybody has recognized their position as an indigenous group, a large group of people, landless people, and they are supporting their fight for relevance in the region. So in this particular manner, Turkey is trying to appease them. They're looking at it favorably, and hopefully these people will get their voice in the politics of Turkey rather than just on paper and laying down of arms.
Shruti Dasgupta, thank you very much. You are staying with us to discuss further updates. However, we move over to the Indo-Pacific, where Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov expressed gratitude to North Korea's leadership, reportedly acknowledging what he described as their significant role in supporting Russia's efforts to reclaim its territories during a meeting with his North Korean counterpart. This comes after Lavrov flew out of the Malaysian capital, Kuala Lumpur, following the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting and arrived in Wonsan, North Korea's eastern coastal city, which is home to a recently opened resort and known for its missile and naval facilities. Here's what the Russian foreign minister had to say.
Признательна руководству Корейской Народно-Демократической Республики и, конечно, всем военнослужащим, солдатам, офицерам, которые продемонстрировали великолепную боевую подготовку и внесли очень важный вклад в справедливое дело.
Lavrov's visit is the latest high-level meeting between the two countries amid a dramatic upgrading of their strategic cooperation that now includes a mutual defense pact. South Korean intelligence service has said North Korea may be preparing to deploy additional troops in July or August after sending more than 10,000 soldiers to fight with Russia in the war against Ukraine. Moreover, according to further reports, North Korea has agreed to dispatch 6,000 military engineers and builders for reconstruction in Russia's conflict-hit Kursk region. After the visit, Lavrov is expected to travel to China to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, which is set to take place on July the 14th and July the 15th. We're now joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao, who's a foreign affairs expert. He joins us live from Tokyo, Japan. Dr. Nagao, thank you very much for joining us as always. What do you make of these comments made by Lavrov? More public gratitude from Moscow to Pyongyang for supporting Russia's territorial ambitions. Is this symbolic, or does it point to deeper military and economic cooperation?
Cooperation with North Korea was quite successful Russia so far because North Korea has already sent 5 million ammunition for Russia. This is very big because European country, EU country, sent 1 million ammunition to the Ukraine. So this means that North Korea provide 5 times bigger amount of the ammunition to Russia. So this is one of the important part of the successful part of the Russia's military operation. So view from this, Russia has a duty to support North Korea as a response. So that's why it is logical if Russia says Pyongyang's effort was good. But in the future, if the North Korea will face a crisis and Russia need to support North Korea, in this case, Russia need to pay the price in the future. That time, the real calculation of this cooperation will come.
Yes, Dr. Nagao, we now move on to further updates, a related development. According to local Russian reports, Russian forces have targeted Ukrainian military airfields, ammunition depots and concentrations of personnel and equipment in over 135 districts over the past 24 hours, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. The strikes were carried out using operational tactical aviation, unmanned aerial vehicles, missile troops and artillery groups. Reports say, in addition to the ground strikes, Russia's air defense system shot down a MiG-29 aircraft of the Ukrainian Air Force during the same 24-hour period. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported these developments as part of ongoing military operations in the region. These actions come amid continued hostilities between Russian and Ukrainian forces, with Russia focusing on crippling Ukraine's military infrastructure and air capabilities. The Russian government has not yet commented on any potential casualties from the latest round of attacks. We're once again joined by Dr. Nagao. Dr. Nagao, how significant are these latest airstrikes, and what have you thought of the recent developments on the Ukrainian battlefield currently? There's been an increase in aerial attacks along with ground operations. However, the significant increase in drone strikes, in missile strikes from both sides. And how significant are these latest strikes? And do you think that they could seriously degrade Ukraine's operational capabilities?
It is not clear the impact of this military operation because both sides, their supply of the ammunition rely on the foreign sources now. And but at the same time, view from the military operation, how to deliver the ammunition to the front line is a matter of concern. In case of drone, in case of missile, because of the long range, their launching pad is located a little bit far from the front line. But anyway, procure the ammunition and bring the ammunition, transport ammunition to the front line is needed. So that's why during these supply line, logistical line, they try to gather the or making the dump of the ammunition and destroy some ammunition dump as happened this time. But this is not total ammunition they are possessing. So that's why maybe both sides will recover this. So not only one incident, but also the total incident of the ammunition dump, the explosion. will affect, of course, situation involved, but only some ammunition dump is, my impact is very temporal and limited, I think.
Dr. Satoru Nagal, thank you very, very much for joining us on the program. We now move back over to the Middle East, where Saudi Arabia's Minister of Industry and Mineral Resources, Bandar al-Khorasiyaf, has told Russian state media that Saudi Arabia is indeed interested in cooperation with Russia in the area of rare earth minerals. He has said that prospects for cooperation with Russia in this area are now being considered. Saudi Arabia's last year announced that its mineral reserves had grown from $1.3 trillion to $1.5 trillion, with rare earth elements included in that estimate. The Saudi minister has noted that the kingdom is seeking further data on the composition and volume of these reserves and is interested in technological collaboration, particularly in the processing and separation of rare earth elements for industrial use. We're now joined by Shruti Dasgupta to discuss this development further. Shruti, how significant is it that Saudi Arabia is now openly exploring rare earth mineral cooperation with Russia? What does each side stand to gain in this?
Well, rare earth elements lead to the production of rare earth magnets, which is very important for green energy production. And your EVs, your high technology planes, all of it. So rare earth elements is like the new gold, but the only problem is they're very common in the world, but they are not, the processing technology of it is not very commonly known. So this is what is the loophole for Saudi Arabia. They know they have the reserves, they don't have the technology to extract and process those minerals. And this is where China has a chokehold on the market. It supplies 95% of it, and it has leveraged this to counter Trump and his tariffs. So as a result, most nations, not just Saudi Arabia, are trying to look for partners that would help them develop a program where they can, the direct extraction can be done from the soil, and these minerals can then be put out in the market. So this is more towards like globalization of rare earth elements. This is the future of technology. This is the future of trade. Not just Saudi Arabia, all the other nations in the Gulf as well as the South Americas are exploring this, and they are wanting to be suppliers of rare earth elements and processors of rare earth magnets to gain an edge into a rare earth magnet market, which is highly lucrative. So Saudi Arabia, by cooperating with Russia, hopes to have access to technology, processing, as well as and gain an upper hand in a developing market. Russia, on the other hand, does not like the hegemonic ideology of China, and it is open to exploring with other trade partners, with all the other sanctions that may not be coming through towards Russia. This can be a major source of income for Russia, as well as access to trades and markets that were not available to it before now. So this is both beneficial for both nations. It will lead to trade not only for Russia and Saudi Arabia. It will help the nations around the globe have access to rare earth elements in a way that they haven't had up till now.
Yes, Shruti, thank you very much. You are staying with us. The European Union is intensifying its trade efforts with ASEAN, prioritising the expansion of existing trade agreements and the pursuit of new deals, particularly in the digital economy, green technologies and supply chain resilience. This move is part of the EU's broader Indo-Pacific strategy and aims to improve sustainable connectivity in the region. In recent developments, the EU has already finalised free trade agreements with Singapore and Vietnam. Negotiations are ongoing with countries like Indonesia, Thailand, the Philippines and Malaysia. A key focus of these efforts is aligning EU priorities with ASEAN's development goals, including strengthening cooperation in green technologies and enhancing digital economies. The EU's Global Gateway initiative, designed to boost infrastructure investments, also plays a critical role in enhancing trade and connectivity between the EU and ASEAN. As ASEAN is viewed as a key partner in the Indo-Pacific region, the EU is adopting a Team Europe approach, coordinating across member states and financial institutions to amplify the impact of these investments. Beyond trade, cooperation is also expanding in political, security and socio-cultural areas, further deepening ties between the two regions. This focus on strategic partnership signals the EU's commitment to strengthening its influence in the Indo-Pacific while advancing long-term sustainable development for all parties involved. Let's listen in to a statement made by Kaja Kallas regarding this.
In the face of the renewed protectionism, we boost our cooperation on trade and defend the rules-based, non-discriminatory, open, fair, inclusive, equitable and transparent trading system with the World Trade Organization at its
Shruti, what does this intensified push tell us about the European Union's priorities right now in the Indo-Pacific region?
So in the Indo-Pacific region, ASEAN is the big dog. And they recently, in May 2025, held a Asian GCC China Summit. That is a trilateral summit which involved China and the Gulf Cooperation Council. So basically, it bridged the entire Gulf regions along with from the global south towards the Chinese markets as well. So this cooperation is supposed to bring a lot of trade and ease of transactions. Now, this is what EU is trying to tap into when it is trying to approach ASEAN. And right now, Malaysia is the head for this ASEAN for this year. So they have spoken and they have kind of said that we are open to it as long as it is not predatory, it is equal in stance, and where the free trade negotiations are happening. EU is trying to tap into ASEAN and its access. There are obviously raw materials are available here. There's a high human resource that remains untapped in the ASEAN member states. So this is something that the EU looks forward to, while ASEAN on its part is willing to offer up all these things, but it does not want to get hurt by this relationship with EU. There should not be discriminatory policies that it applies to single particular states. Everyone needs to be treated equally, and this entire thing has a big economic potential for both for Eurasia on a whole.
Shruti Dasgupta, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. We now turn to South America for our next update, where Brazilian President Lula da Silva is pushing back hard against growing US pressure on trade and judicial affairs, responding to US President Donald Trump's threat to impose a 50% tariff on Brazilian imports starting from August the 1st. Lula made it clear that Brazil will not back down. He stressed that Brazil, not the United States, runs a trade deficit in the bilateral relationship, and said that any attempt to unilaterally impose tariffs will be met with reciprocity. The Brazilian leader also rejected outside influence over his country's judicial system amid comments from Trump criticizing Brazil's ongoing legal actions against former President Jair Bolsonaro. Lula reaffirmed Brazil's sovereignty, calling his country's institutions strong and independent. Let's listen in to the Brazilian president.
Não tem comercial com o Brasil. É o Brasil que tem déficit comercial com os Estados Unidos. Vou tentar e brigar em todas as esferas para que não venha taxação. Vou brigar no OMC, vou conversar com meus companheiros dos BRICS. Agora, se não tiver jeito no papo, no tete-a-tete, nós vamos estabelecer a reciprocidade. Taxou aqui, a gente taxa lá. Taxou aqui, a gente taxa lá. Taxou aqui.
We're now joined by Rabinder Sachdev, who is an international affairs expert. He joins us to discuss this ongoing situation in further detail. Rabinder, thank you very much for joining us, first of all. President of Brazil, Lula da Silva, says Brazil will not back down. What tools does he actually have to respond if these heavy tariffs are imposed?
Thank you very much. A pleasure. And great questions. What tools does he have? He would have, as he said, he can go to the WTO. He could rally up the nations of the BRICS and the BRICS bloc. These are two. So broadly speaking, let's say he'll try and pursue legal methods and diplomatic methods, right? But both of these will not be enough to, reduce the damage or the hurt which these tariffs could impose on the Brazilian economy. At the same time, what this would do, however, is spread a sentiment across the world for more and more nations to group up amongst themselves and to move away from the United States, or to try insulate themselves from the United States by, let's say, strengthening their regional blocs and groupings, including the BRICS. So it would have an impact for both, actually. While, yes, it is true, what Trump is saying that America runs a deficit with Brazil. No, that is wrong, as Lula also pointed out. The US exports about $50 billion worth of goods, goods trade, right? And Brazil 43. So in fact, it's Brazil which has about $7 or $8 billion deficit running with the US. So that's the facts or the numbers on the ground. But now back to, President Lula and the situation. Trump, okay, why is Trump doing it? A couple of things broadly, I think. One, in a big picture, the United States looks at the southern hemisphere of the South Americas as its backyard, one. Secondly, in that backyard, it does not want now, more and more, any left-leaning or socialist-leaning governments, and also, yes, to, push back against China or China's growing influence. So the left and socialist governments in South America will face, pressures and challenges from the United States under a Trump administration, without doubt. They were facing pressures under the Biden administration also, but from a different perspective. Here, Trump has personalized matters also. So though he's talking about economic rationale for the tariffs, it's much more the optopolitics that he's wanting to project. And also, of course, in the same vein, Bolsonaro, who was known as, or is known as the Trump of the tropics, right? He is kind of a soulmate with Trump. So Trump would very much like to, bolster a Bolsonaro. Plus, there's one more issue with Brazil. Brazil had, if you remember, blocked Twitter in between for some time. So for Trump, okay, other than his falling out with Musk right now, maybe he's not very happy with Twitter now, but still, the charge is that, Brazil is creating artificial barriers for the expansion of the US technology companies in Brazil under Lula, right? So that's another beef that Trump has with Brazil.
Yes, Rupinder Sachdev, thank you very much for joining us. You are staying with us to discuss further updates. We now move north, where Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has condemned recent US immigration raids targeting migrant workers in California, calling them unjust and harmful to the US economy. Speaking at a press conference on Friday, Sheinbaum emphasized that such actions could significantly impact US agriculture. Listen in to what she had to say.
Estas redadas son muy injustas, pero además van a dañar mucho la economía de Estados Unidos. Además, aparte de la injusticia, van a dañar mucho la economía de Estados Unidos. Las y los mexicanos, y no solo mexicanos, sino de otras nacionalidades, latinos, fortalecen la economía de Estados Unidos.
In response to the raids, which occurred on Thursday in Southern California, Sheinbaum announced that Mexican consulate staff would visit detention centers to assess how many Mexican nationals have been detained. Additionally, Sheinbaum revealed plans to increase funding for Mexico's consulates in the United States, with a focus on providing legal support to detained Mexican citizens. She said, quote, "Our brothers and sisters over there need legal assistance, and we're going to ensure they get it." The raids conducted by US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, otherwise known as ICE, have sparked a wave of criticism from Mexico, which continues to advocate for better protections and support for its citizens abroad. We're now once again joined by Rubinder Sachdev. Rubinder, how unusual is it for Mexico's president to condemn these US immigration raids so publicly? We've also we've seen a bit of a diplomatic tussle when it's come to Sheinbaum and Trump. We've seen a good relationship for them, Trump praising Sheinbaum on numerous occasions. However, Donald Trump's immigration policy is staunch. What are your thoughts on how Sheinbaum has reacted to these most recent immigration raids?
Thank you. Yeah, Sheinbaum has been a very calm leader in face of, the US policy changes ever since Trump has assumed office. She has been firm but calm, right? Not picking up any rhetoric back and forth as compared to, let's say, Canada, where there's been, fireworks going on between the leaders. The Mexican, Trump himself has praised her. And within Mexico also, she's been praised for the calm manner in which she has handled the relationship with America under Trump. But yes, by her saying this, she is definitely taking a clear public stance, which she has to. She has actually not shied away from articulating the interests of Mexico, right? Though she has been calm and Trump has praised, and even in phone calls with Trump, she has not shied away. So she has been firm. So I would say it's in line with the stance that she's been taking. And the fact is that, Trump himself, or from economic reasons, overall, since January, over 70,000 Mexicans have been deported. 72 or 73,000 have been deported. And around 400 are in or under arrest. Apparently, those are some numbers. Now, about 20% of the US workforce in sectors like agriculture, food processing, scrap collection, etc., and hospitality are from south of the Americas, and out of which about 60% are Mexicans. So that's a large number. Now, the uncertainty with the status of these workers and all had led to these very industries of hospitality and construction and food processing, agriculture to lobby with Trump and to ask for some restraint or relaxation of the ICE actions. Trump in between relented also, I think about a month ago. For a period of 4 or 5 days, he said, no, for these sectors, we'll make exemptions. But then again, after 5 days, the ICE is under a target of 3,000 arrests a day. As of now, they've been doing about 1,000, 1,200 all across America, right? And the ICE senior officials are being pulled up in every review meeting by the Homeland Secretary and others, the FBI, including Steve Miller, including, to ramp up the numbers. So there's a lot of uncertainty going around in these sectors, and of course with the overall immigration arrests and deportations and the ad hoc nature, the whimsical nature, which ICE seems to be adopting.
Yes, now we move to some more US foreign policy moves, where in a diplomatic move, the US State Department has imposed fresh sanctions on top Cuban officials, including President Miguel Diaz-Canel, on the 4th anniversary of Cuba's 2021 anti-government protests. Announcing the measures, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, himself the son of Cuban immigrants, said the US is restricting visas for Diaz-Canel, the country's defense and interior ministers, and other, quote, cronies of the regime for their role in suppressing peaceful demonstrators. Rubio also revealed that Cuba's luxury Torre Hotel has been added to the list of restricted properties, calling it a symbol of government excess, while ordinary Cubans face widespread shortages of food, medicine and electricity. 10 more regime-linked properties have been blacklisted under the US State Department's prohibited accommodations list, part of what Rubio called a message of solidarity with political prisoners and the Cuban people. We're once again joined by Rubinder Sachdev. Rubinder, how significant are these new sanctions, especially the visa restrictions on Diaz-Canel and other of these top Cuban officials? Will they have any real impact?
They would have some impact, little impact. I mean, in any case, the officials whose visas would not be issued or sanctioned are not going to be traveling to the US, right? So that doesn't have any effect other than symbolic. Yes, some of these sanctions on the hotel and those properties which you mentioned would impact the government in terms of its revenue and all. What is more important to me, it seems that this may be indicative of what is to come ahead. What it means, see, I mean, the protests were back in 21, right, after COVID, because Cubans were, fed up with COVID, shortage of medicine, shortage of food. So protests erupted across the country, saying no to the party or no to the Communist Party. And remember, Cuba is a single party system. No other political party is allowed. So there is no opposition as such party, right? So what this indicates also is that, the Cubans in exile, especially if in exile, or the Cuban immigrants in America, especially the ones in Florida, which includes Secretary of State Marco Rubio, they are now getting more active to bring more pressure on Cuba in the days ahead. That's what I would look at it as. Now, what can be the more harsher steps that the US can take? Well, more sanctions and more sanctions. But we don't know what Trump could pull out of the hat and maybe come up with something else. But Cuba, in any case, is under sanctions and isolated from the Americas. So in that sense, it doesn't make much of a difference. But yes, to my mind, it indicates that more harsher steps by the US could be forthcoming in times to come.
Rubinder Sachdev, pleasure having you on the program as always. Well, that is all we have time for this hour, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you.